We've been missing you. Do you want to find the witch friends you've been missing? Do you want to participate in these conversations live? And do you want to support the work of recovering a true history of feminist ideas about magic? Do you want to hang out? Do you want an invite to Zoom together with Amy and myself every new moon, along with our hilarious, diverse, wise, queer, creative, anti-racist, science, and awe-loving coven? You must join the Missing Witches Patreon. It's pay what you can, and we can't wait to meet you there. Patreon.com/missingwitches.
You aren't being a proper woman, therefore you must be a witch.
Be a witch. Be a witch. Be a witch. Be a witch. Be a witch. Be a witch.
You must be a witch.
Yay! So good to see you. How are you?
I'm really well. I'm emotionally well. My whole family has a cold, so I'm gonna try to
Oh, no.
I'm gonna try to sneeze on mute.
Well, I hope you all feel better soon, and thank goodness it isn't something, that's way worse.
Yeah, we're doing okay. We're doing all right. How are you?
I'm not too bad. There's just a lot going on, and there's so many things going on. Like this Saturn return is really working me. In a good way. It's things that I enjoy. So I'm just kind of pushing myself to go really out of my comfort zone, but it's good.
Yeah. Well, I want to hear more about that. I'm gonna do an official kind of open the container officially for this.
Really?
Does that sound good? Hi folks.
Absolutely.
Hi Coven. Thanks for being here. Take a deep breath. Monefa's got her candles lit. She was messaging me right before. I hope you feel a candle lit in your heart. Welcome to the Missing Witches podcast. Welcome deep breaths. Welcome heavy sighs. Welcome first signs of spring. Welcome the heartache of a world at war. Welcome to the 25 red poles, these tiny birds who have found my feeder in the last 2 days, who are giving me a little bit of insight into lightness. Welcome to our coven. Welcome to our brilliant guests. Welcome back to the Missing Witches podcast, folks. We love you. Let's talk today about patterns in the world. We have one of our dear friends of the podcast back. It's actually the first time that she and I get to sit down together. Amy got to do all our previous interviews. So we're sitting down together for the first time. Monefa Walker, thanks for being here. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm actually doing okay. There's so many changes since I last spoke to Amy and was on the podcast, and internally, externally.
Do you want to start with a new intro then? Why don't you introduce yourself afresh?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so hello, Coven members. Hello, anyone who's listening. So I'm Monefa Walker. I live in London, and I'm an astrologer and a coach and a classical pianist and a composer. But I'm also now a student at university studying a BA honours in French and Spanish, because I want to go into translation as well. And it's one of those really weird things where I've been trying to decolonize my mind and reconnect with lost parts of my heritage and my ancestry, and learning languages, particularly French and Spanish, has been a way for me to do that. And it's really interesting because it really is connected to my Saturn return, which is in the 8th house in Aquarius, and it's opposite all my 5 planets in Leo, including my sun and moon. And it's really interesting because my Leo planets are in my 2nd house. And I know for those that are, into astrology, well, I don't want to say into astrology because astrology is a language. So those that understand the language of astrology will recognize the 2nd house as a money house, a resource house. And that is true. But if we go a bit deeper into the 2nd house is also about ancestry. It's also about what we inherit from people before us. So the fact that Leo is in my second house means that ancestors before me had quite a regality to them. Some of them may have even been royal, and a lot of that was lost. A lot of the knowledge was lost, a lot of the language was lost, and it's very synchronous that my Saturn return, I'm trying to now rediscover these things again. So it's almost like I'm kind of trying to heal that disconnect between my ancestors and myself. And it's really, really interesting, especially because Jupiter's in my third house in Virgo, and third house is the house of communication and ideas and learning, and Jupiter's high learning, spirituality. So I've got a lot of ideas going on in my head. And of course, as well, because I have a neurodivergent mind, this is why I do several things. You know, I'm not just an astrologer or just a musician. I had to branch out into various things that I enjoy, so I don't get bored. And also I can kind of engage in different areas in life, which means I can connect with different people as well. That's really, really important to me.
I mean, yeah, I get all of that. Can you talk a bit, one piece you said I was so curious about, that French and Spanish were the languages that you chose for that reconnection. Can you talk about why those languages are that bridge for that relationship?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So most of my family are from Jamaica and Scotland, mainly Jamaica, and there's also a lot of Jews in my family as well, Sephardic Jews. When they were alive, they would have spoken French and Spanish and Ladino and maybe a tiny little bit of Hebrew. And then when they had to leave Spain due to the Spanish Inquisition, and some went to the Caribbean. For those that don't know the history of the Caribbean, it was colonized by the French, by the Spanish, and by the British as well. So this is why the Caribbean islands will have a Creole language, which is like a mixture of either French or Spanish or English. So it allows me to tap into various parts of my ancestry rather than just one route. It's like, oh, I can tap into my Jewish side, I can tap into my Caribbean side, I can tap into my Scottish side, and it's really, really wild and interesting and really divine as well. And I don't know if other people have experienced this, but I've noticed that when you start speaking other languages other than your mother tongue, especially if it's English, you get more comfortable at expressing different dialects. Like I've noticed that I'm more comfortable like speaking more Jamaican patois, or what's also known as Creole, and just the way that I kind of carry myself is very different now. And I feel that it's definitely a factor of the decolonization that I'm going through on a very internal and cellular level, where I'm like, well, I don't have to assimilate to the point where I lose my identity and I'm trying to be something that I'm not. I can be confident in not assimilating that much while still integrating with the environment around me. And it's a very, very delicate balance to navigate. And I also feel like it's a gift as well that I have been given the opportunity to, like I said, heal that disconnect and navigate this path and really, really kind of like reap all the gifts from my ancestors. I know a lot of us talk about, you know, generational traumas and things like that, but our ancestors didn't just give us traumas, they gave us a lot of gifts. You know, when we're alive today, we were in their dreams once upon a time. They had dreams that one day someone in their family would be able to do the things that we do now, if it's casting magic or being spiritual, going to the arts, being able to walk down the road and just be free and not have to worry about being restricted. And yes, of course, I know there are restrictions, but nothing compared to what our ancestors went through, absolutely nothing. And that is a gift, and that, you know, that allows us to appreciate it a lot more. And with my Saturn return as well, Saturn brings so much wisdom. And when it's in the 8th house of death and rebirth and alchemy, and in Aquarius, which is like a higher octave of intelligence, it's just really wild, because I was expected to go into it thinking, oh, a lot of things in my mind will be restricted and I'll be full of all this fear. And the actual opposite has happened. And what I actually understand that is actually my Saturn placement is there to temper the power that's inside me, because it squares my Pluto and Scorpio, right? And now I understand that if Saturn wasn't there, I don't know, I probably wouldn't have a lot of self-control in regards to how my power is wielded and how I use it. But because I'm getting older, this square between Saturn and Pluto is not as not as inhibiting as it used to be. But now I'm understanding that Saturn is kind of like tempering that power within. It's like, okay, take your time. We don't have to rush it all. The words of Ben Parker from Spider-Man comes to my mind: with great power comes great responsibility. And I feel like that's what Saturn is reminding me. It's like, now. Have you checked that? Have you double checked that? Are you sure? And plus, it opposes my Mercury and my Sun and my Venus in Leo. So, even when I'm going about doing things and expressing myself, there's always like a little voice in the back of my mind, like, just double check, just in case, so we don't make any mistakes, so we don't make any boo-boos,
I do. I know what you mean. Yeah. Like working with Saturn can seem really scary, but there is an element to it that's just really like, get your ducks in a row, like get your shit straight.
Absolutely. And it really allows you to understand why it's important to have a certain structure in your life. And that's the thing, you don't want it to be too restrictive where you just exist within that box, but you don't want to be in constant free fall all the time as well. And when Saturn's in an air sign like Aquarius, it's really fortunate because first of all, Saturn co-rules Aquarius, but Aquarius is an air sign. So I don't feel I have that earth-like restriction that I would have if it was in Capricorn, say, for instance. It kind of allows me to just kind of like dip in and out. And Aquarius rules like technology and internet. And I've noticed that I do tend to do that. I tend to dip in and out on social media, on the internet. And then when I do come back, it's like, I've got some new wisdom to share with you all. This is the deal.
Yeah, I've noticed that following you on social media lately, that it feels like there was like a change where you were like, this is a boundary I'm going to put. I'm not going to be here unavailable for you all the fucking time. I'm going to come back when I have something to say, and then I'm going to shut this down, and I'm not going to be porous in this space, which I think is a good example for a lot of us, how we can manage our social media, the way it can be such a painful suck.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's funny enough, you're not the first person to say that to me recently as well. And it goes back to, something that has been discussed multiple times on your podcast and in your coven space about that duality, and of course a lot of people will be like, technology and social media is really bad, or people go, no, it's really good. And it's like, actually, it's what we make it, because we're our own sovereign beings. It's really what we make it. It can do a lot of really amazing things. It can help find missing people, it can help reconnect lost loved ones, it can help you talk to someone that's 50,000 miles away in the southern hemisphere to check that they're okay and they're safe. But at the same time, to err is to be human, and we always have to be mindful of that as well when we do engage with these technologies. But going back to the Saturn aspects, Saturn is very, very present on a global scale. I mean, like the UK, for instance, its sun sign is ruled by Capricorn. America just had its Pluto return in Capricorn, and actually both of the countries are interconnected, and I've discussed this on my Patreon the other day. Going back a little bit to mythology, so there was this old wives' tale that if any of the ravens left the Tower of London, that would kind of spell the beginning of the end of the current empire as we know it. And what was interesting is that last year one of the ravens did leave the tower. And people started getting into a panic because they were like, what does this mean then? And not long after that happened, Harry and Meghan, they left the UK to go to the US. And the UK tabloids are talking about Operation London Bridge, which is basically something that falls into place whenever the Queen dies. And lots of other things. And also, the UK is very much connected to the US. The capitalist structure in the US was built by people in the UK through that migration, through the transatlantic slave trade. So, whatever happens here happens in America and vice versa. So the Pluto return in America, I don't want to go into it too much because a lot of people have already, but because it's in Capricorn, which is about capitalism, institutions, money, and because you've got Neptune and Pisces, if we look at it on a financial level, it actually indicates that the dollar currency won't be the primary currency anymore. That is going to shift again. The dollar will lose some value. I know we're all focusing on the ruble at the moment, but the dollar is also something we should look at. It's not going to be the primary currency driver. And it's interesting because Neptune rules currency, and it's currently in Pisces with Jupiter, and Jupiter's also connected to money. And when you think about the military influences the value of the currency of the country. So obviously after World War II, the value of the American dollar went right sky high up because of that, increased military influence. But the military is ruled by Virgo, which is opposite in Pisces. So again, this is showing that there's going to be a push and pull between, who's going to be able to take that position that America's had for so long in terms of being that primary power in terms of currency value. And I wanted to discuss a few things as well, which is really interesting related to this. So if we look at, hold on a minute. Okay, yeah. So if we look at Russia, for instance, and I just want to say as a disclaimer, when I discuss astrology about things happening in the world, I'm not one of those people that's using it as a substitute to kind of wish-wash the realities of what's happening. I use it to connect the patterns that a lot of people may not realize or may not recognize. So what's really interesting with Russia's birth chart is that Saturn is currently in Aquarius, but then natal Neptune is also in Aquarius. And I said that Neptune is connected to currency and Saturn is there. And we're already seeing right now, currently, there's a massive, massive squeeze on their currency value right now. It's shrinking, getting smaller and smaller. It won't be like that forever, but this year, yeah, the ruble won't really be worth much. And if we look at the ascendant of Russia is Scorpio, where the South Node currently is. And Scorpio is connected to like minerals and commodities like oil. And wherever the South Node is, it actually restricts that position in such a way that the opposite house will then go up, increase in price. So because the opposite sign of Scorpio is Taurus and the North Node is in Taurus, this is why we're seeing a lot of increasing prices in gas and oil and food. Even things we enjoy, like the arts, like, to go to a concert now or to a show is really expensive, but that's because the arts have suffered for quite a while as well. And yeah, it's really interesting to kind of understand that, as above, so below, right? As within, so without. So whenever I'm looking at these things, it's like, okay, that's really interesting. So back to the money aspect in terms of the currency. What's also interesting is that Ukraine sun sign is in Virgo. And I already mentioned Virgo is about the military and it's opposing Pisces. So this is part of the reason why, well, not the war aspect, but the financial aspect. That's why there's a strain on Ukraine as well. But I do have some countries that we should all be looking out for in terms of who's going to take over the American dollar currency. So if we look at the countries that are ruled by the Taurus sun sign, which is a sign of money, or where the North Node is, so some of the countries that are ruled by Taurus are Cyprus, the Greek islands, Cuba, South Africa, Yemen, and Serbia. Now, I'm not saying that, overnight, hey, these countries are, their currency value is going to, grow overnight exponentially, but they are going to be more prevalent in certain discussions that will be had about the stock market and trading and finance, because the North Node is that. But if we look at Virgo and look at the countries who are ruled by Virgo, as I mentioned, Ukraine has a Virgo sun sign, but also Brazil, Switzerland, the Caribbean, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Estonia, Moldova, Qatar. So again, these are all countries, the countries that I mentioned that have a sun sign in Virgo and Taurus, we really need to look out for, because Pluto is still in Capricorn, Taurus and Virgo are the other two earth signs. So there's an interesting trine that will be happening with these countries where there will be a shift of power, there will be a transformation of power, there will be a lot of shifting of structures, institutions, and ideas, and it will create some instability. Now, the instability can come out in a multitude of different ways. So anyone who's listening, just look out for those countries in the next year or two and see what happens there.
That's so interesting. I mean, I think that jives with some of what we've been hearing about how the sanctions on Russia are going to force a lot of countries to turn to other places for grain as well as oil. So there's
exactly, and I think that's where we're going to be looking at countries in the southern hemisphere a bit more, like parts of South America, like South Africa, for instance, because Russia isn't the only place that has oil. But also the other big thing that's coming up is April the 12th. Now, I'm really excited to talk about this because the synchronicities with this conjunction is wild. So April 12th, we have the Neptune and Jupiter conjunction in Pisces. Now, Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. It's also the higher octave of Venus. So whatever love we experience in Libra and Taurus, it's amplified tenfold in Pisces. And what's also really amazing is that both Jupiter and Neptune rule Pisces together. So they're at home, they're really comfortable, they're really cozy, they want to get stuff done. And there's lots of things that are going to be happening. So I mentioned them briefly, I think, the last time I spoke to Amy, but both Jupiter and Neptune, you know, Jupiter on its own rules things like law, finance, education, philosophy, religion, science, you know, ideas at a much higher level. And then Neptune is about, you know, the astral plane where we create everything. Everything is created in the astral plane first. It's also about dissolving those boundaries, you know, that water aspect where you don't have that Saturnian structure. You can just kind of go in and out, in and out. So when they're together on April the 12th, that's going to be bringing some big ideas. Now, also, Pisces can also lead to deception and delusion as well. Because you see those articles flying about, like, you know, which sun sign are the most serial killers? And I never bother with that, because it's never about the sun sign. When you're looking at serial killers, it's always about the ascendant. And if you look at the ascendant, the majority of serial killers have an ascendant in Capricorn and Pisces. So with Pisces, you always have to be mindful that the water can be really warm and you can swim in it and you can dream in it, but be mindful of what those dreams are. Are they illusions, or are they things you can turn into reality? So lots of things are going to happen with this conjunction. Neptune also was the entertainment industry, so we're going to see a massive, massive renaissance in the arts. It will be expensive at the beginning, but there's going to be so much available for everyone at all ages, at all levels, just a real expansion, and a lot of artists coming through. I mean, some of them are already coming through, and it's really exciting and really great to see, especially with some of them are my friends as well. But in terms of the community, there's a real opportunity to essentially hit the reset button and start with love again. And I know that sounds very hippie, but it's true, because Pisces is the last sign in the zodiac. It's the 12th house, and with the 12th house, it's always about shedding and letting go and filling that space of love, so you can then be ready to go into the first house of Aries and allow everyone to see who your sense of self is. So on a macro level, on a global level, it's like, okay, we've all seen how ugly we can really be. We know how potentially ugly we can be to ourselves, to each other, to the world. So now that recognition, what's really stopping us from resetting something of sorts and starting again? There isn't really a lot stopping us, apart from, you know, obvious things, you know, like, you know, finances and war. What I mean is that even with those things in place, there will still be solutions. It won't just be, you know, let's give up, it's hopeless. No, there's always going to be hope. There's always going to be a chance, but we have to really take that chance. And I wrote some really cool things down, because the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction only happens every 13 years. The next time it will happen in Pisces won't be until 2188. So unless we, you know, decided to become immortal like an altered carbon, none of us will be here for that conjunction again. But the last time it happened in Pisces was 1856, and it's a wild year. I'm just going to go through some of the things that happened that year. It was a wild, wild year. So 1856 is also a leap year. And when things happen in leap year, it expands, amplifies, because a lot of talents and traits are kind of elevated, because, you know, the planets and you know, their cycles don't necessarily adhere to the Gregorian calendar. So in 1856, for example, on January 23rd, a ship called SS Pacific left Liverpool going to America. There was 186 people on board, and it disappeared. It never docked in America. No one knows what happened to it. And it's interesting because Pisces, is water, Neptune's water, Jupiter's travel. And then if we look at January 29th of that year, Queen Victoria of England introduced the Victoria Cross, which is it's like one of the highest military badges you can receive for your services. A lot of men in the World War I, World War II received them for their sacrifices and, their gallantry and what they did and their services. There was a lot of wars that year as well, but it's not all doom and gloom. There's a lot of wars, but there was a lot of agreements and peace treaties as well. So February the 1st of that year, there was, I think it was somewhere in America, there was a introduction of university. I can't remember the name of that because I didn't write it down. But February the 2nd, Dallas officially became a city in Texas in 1856. February the 2nd, Dallas officially became a city. In March, a man called William Henry Perkins introduced the first synthetic dye purely by accident. He was actually trying to synthesize quinine. And while he was doing that, he came across this synthetic dye that was used later on in various things, especially textiles. That same month was also the war between the Nepalese and the Tibetan people. But at the end of March was the end of the Crimean War. So this is what I mean. There's a lot of chaos happening that year, but there was a lot of agreements and people, again, going to a place of love and going, okay, well, it's gotten ugly. Could it get any uglier? Let's just, shake hands and go our separate ways. April 16th, the Maritime Law of Paris basically declared a regulation so that traders in the seas and in the ocean could get a fairer deal. Because before then, a lot of people were getting ripped off. Either the trader or the tradee were getting ripped off. May 24th, the Potawatomi massacre, which was an abolitionist rebellion against some pro-slavers. And again, that's coming from a very high place of love. Like, hey, like why are we enslaving people? Why are we not doing anything about it? Let's F shit up, And then July 31st of that year, Christchurch officially became the city of New Zealand. October the 8th was the second Opium War, which is really interesting because Pisces, Jupiter, Neptune, all substances and all drugs. And I actually mentioned to Amy that I reckon that there is going to be increased drug use this year, but more importantly, I think some new drugs will be introduced into the community, very psychedelic drugs, because I think some people are so desperate to check out of reality right now and be in a space where they can just dream and love. So I definitely think that's definitely on its way. Whether they'll be considered legal highs or pharmaceuticals, I don't know, but that's definitely on its way as well. But yeah, October the 8th, 1856 was the second Opium War that broke out. And it's really, really bad as well. Thousands, if not millions of people got caught up in that. November the 1st, there was an Anglo-Persian War. And then December the 2nd, the National Portrait Gallery in London was established. And again, Pisces is about creativity, art. So there's a massive, massive need after the end of the Crimean War to like, okay, how are we going to reinvest that energy and those ideas into something that isn't going to kill people? And art is a great way to do that. Now, this is where it gets really cool. When we look into who was born in the year of 1856. Oh my gosh. So January 11th, 1856, we had Christian Sinding, which is who is a Norwegian composer, very well renowned, not just in this country, but in the whole classical community, even to this day. February 21st, a man called Gottlieb. He was born in Austria, Poland, which is actually now Western Ukraine. And he was an artist and he was a poet and he was very much considered a pioneer of his time. April 5th, we had the birth of Booker T. Washington. Again, another pioneering mind, really understood that an enslaved person doesn't have to mean an enslaved mind, and he still uses quotes to this day. May the 6th, Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud was born May the 6th of that year with this conjunction. And again, this conjunction, there's no limits, there's no boundary because it's dissolving boundaries. So when you think of Jupiter, which is about higher learning high ideas, philosophy, it would make sense that someone like Freud would be born in that year. Another visionary that was born that year, July the 10th, Nikola Tesla. Again, someone else that had a mind with no boundaries, no limits, and again was a pioneer, and underappreciated, might I add as well, because I wasn't taught about him in school, and it really annoyed me. But yeah, you know, we still use his technology to this day. Part of the reason why we have certain technologies like smartphones, I mean, he's not the only reason why we have smartphones, but he is one of the reasons why we have technologies like smartphones. Also, Hedy Lamarr and Alan Turing, thank you so much for the smartphone technology. But yes, July 26th, George Bernard Shaw. He was an Irish writer, a playwright. Yeah.
I was just going to say, Nikola Tesla, I think also was imprisoned and tortured by the Russians for like a decade. Like, I think he was caught up in this sort of spy stuff back and forth between the West and Russia didn't want to let him or his knowledge go. It's just an interesting connection to where we're circled back to in a relationship with Russia again. I did want to ask you more about Russia. I'm fascinated by this relationship that you're seeing, this pattern that you're seeing. So I don't want to derail you, but I do want to plant a seed if you'll come back to it for us to talk about. I've heard people talking about Putin making certain decisions, dates that he's invading on, and it being really clear that there's a numerology to decisions that he's making. And yeah, people sort of talking about how it's obvious that he is looking at astrology. Is that something that you've noticed? Is that something that is a concern for you? How do we interact with that?
I have noticed it, but I have to say that his ego is blinding him from some of the facts. I mean, if I quickly bring up the chart again. Okay, so Jupiter's going to go into Aries around about the summertime. The specific date, unfortunately, has now eluded me. But it will be going into Aries for a short while in the summertime. Now, what's interesting is that Russia has its Pluto in Aries, and its Pluto squares America's Pluto in Capricorn. And also it will be opposing Russia's midheaven at this time in Libra. So what I think is very likely to happen is that one way or another, I mean, yeah, I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but basically certain steps will be made that will be overzealous, and there will have to be a retreat of sorts. Now, it could be a physical retreat, it could be a financial retreat. It can go different ways, because Pluto is money, it's wealth, but it's power. Aries is all about the self. And when you have Jupiter amplifying that, you can really be blinded by your need for others, by your need to connect, because Aries is all about the self. We don't recognize someone else until we get into Gemini, which, by the way, Jupiter is in Gemini for Russia as well. So again, when the North Node was going through Gemini in the past year, you could kind of see that these things were bubbling up within him, within Russia, because the North Node was there, and he's thinking, you know, how can I seek out different ways to gain power, to gain knowledge, to gain ideas, because Gemini's ideas. So this is happening as we were speaking. Also, Gemini is their 8th house, which is about power, death, rebirth. So this is something that he planned overnight. This is something that was definitely building up for a while, and now it's coming to a head. However, you know, the North Node is in Taurus, and that's to do with relationships with Russia. So if they don't seek out relationships with others that they may not have sought out before in a way that is respectful, that is harmonious, it's going to affect them, especially financially, but even spiritually as well. Because, you know, when you have an ascendant like Scorpio, again, it's going back to being responsible with your power. And if you're not responsible with that power can start turning in on itself. And I've seen this happen to, you know, Scorpio people in my life, where if they don't do that introspection, if they don't check in with themselves, if they don't stop for a moment and go, why am I really doing this? It can become an internal implosion. And if you're talking about a country, then the country can implode on it in itself. Now, how that implosion could look, well, you know, I don't want to find people, but that could come about in a multitude of ways, because Russia is a massive country, but it only became a massive country by invading so many other countries, by, you know, completely dominating them and killing people, and, you know, grabbing that back. What I think that he has underestimated is that this time around is going to have a really serious effect on the everyday people, of course, but also, you know, Russia's influence in the world. Because if we look in terms of the arts, again, you know, there's so many Russian literary writers, playwrights, composers, and these all have a knock-on effect as well, because Russia's sun sign is in Libra and it's at 0 degrees. No, not 0 degrees, sorry, it's at 17 degrees, but it's in the 12th house, which is the hidden house. And the ascendant of the Libra ascendant, Libra is the ascendant ruler of the UK. And this is partly why this country really isn't, you know, being robust with its intentions, the way that it was that we saw with Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran and Libya. Like, you know, this country didn't think twice about jumping in there with troops, but because, you know, UK's ascendant is Libra and the sun sign of Russia is Libra in the 12th house, there's this hidden aspect of we have a connection, we have a relationship that goes way back, and you kind of owe us. So, you know, if you get a bit too involved, that won't be good for you. So yes, the UK has imposed financial sanctions on Russian oligarchs, but they're not really doing a lot more than that. And going back to what I was saying, when Jupiter goes into Aries, this will be opposing Russia's midheaven, its Saturn and its Sun, all in Libra, all in the 12th house. The 12th house as well, going back to Pisces, that, you know, every sign has a darker manifestation. So one of the darker manifestations of Pisces, on one hand, is no inhibitions, no boundaries, which can lead to horrible things like murder, death, but also it can be self-sabotage. And it goes back to what I was saying about if you're not responsible with that Scorpio energy, it can implode on itself. So yeah, by the summertime, I mean, I don't want to say definitively, yeah, it's all going to be over, but mistakes will be made, because the sense of self will be so concentrated, so amplified, that he will lose sight, and anyone as well in that energy will lose sight of what it means to connect with other people, to have relationships with other people. And if you sabotage that, you know, if you really sabotage that, it's going to really backfire in a way that you don't expect, where you could isolate yourself completely and you don't have a lot of power and you don't have a lot of resources. Or if you do, you have to go back them in very, very sneaky ways. But even then, that already indicates that you haven't got that same grip on power anymore. And as I said, you know, Saturn's going to be in Aquarius until early 2023. And then Neptune's in Aquarius. So financially, the squeeze is going to get tighter and tighter and tighter, especially when Saturn goes retrograde. And Jupiter will be in Aries by then. We'll be getting very tight, very tight, very tight. And it may be too late by then to reach out and ask for help. That doesn't mean that's going to necessarily stop what he wants to do. And actually, you know, if you think about what he said the other day about, you know, no one wins, that very much speaks to what I was saying about that Sun and Libra 12th house energy, where it's like, hey, if I don't win, none of us win. You know, if I don't get the relationships that I want, none of us will get the relationships that we want. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to go his way either. It doesn't mean it's going to go his way. And yeah, I'm keeping a watch on other countries, including the UK. As I said, their ascendant is Libra and our sun sign is Capricorn, and Pluto return in Capricorn happened in the US. So there is a triangle going on here. And I do think it is down to the fact that this empire that we're seeing is crumbling, and this empire has had a lot of heavy influence by this country, America and Russia. And, you know, we still have about I think at least another 3-4 years till Pluto goes into Aquarius. But yeah, the structures as we know it within 10 years will be gone. Now, if better ones will be replaced, that's really up to us, because Aquarius is about the people, community. So that is really up to us. And again, this is why astrology is always in synchronicity with us, because the conjunction in Pisces is saying, hey, before we branch out into a new empire, into a new civilization, we need to introduce love at the base level, because otherwise we're going to be rebuilding the same thing again, but on a more darker level. Because again, the dark manifestation of Aquarius is complete and utter mind control. And this is why I said that when Jupiter and Saturn were in Aquarius last year, I said that we had to watch about the resurgence of cults. Because you know, a lot of the cults that came about in the 60s, again, that was due to a lot of Aquarius energy happening at that time. And with Aquarius, sometimes because it's an air sign, if it's not tempered enough by Saturn again, it can really go off piste, and it can really, really hurt people. And I do want to add, I don't want to be too dark, but I don't want to be too dark, but the Saturn Neptune conjunction as well. We have to be careful that there may potentially be like a mass cult suicide. Like, you know, that the one that we had of Heaven's Gate in the 90s, that is a potential to look out for as well, because there's so much fear going on about, you know, is there going to be a nuclear explosion? Are we going to die? It can be really easy for certain cults and cult leaders to then, you know, convince people, well, hey, you know, we need to go and leave these bodies and go and do the work somewhere else in a different plane and come back and help our people. But we can't do that unless we die, right? I don't want to sound too macabre, but yeah, we need to be on the watch out for that as well, because there's so much panic and fear about what could happen. It's really easy for some people to be convinced, yes, mass suicide with my cult must be the answer to solving the ills of humanity. So we do need to watch out for that as well.
That makes me think of, you know, people having these really violent reactions to mask requirements or, you know, things that are really just sort of basic protection, that this like putting ourselves and our vulnerable people at risk out of a distorted idea of freedom. I don't know, that sort of sounds related to what you're talking about.
It does, absolutely. And you're right on the money again, because Pisces is connected to our immune system, our immune health, and Jupiter is also connected to our health as well. Some people don't want any kind of, I don't want to say restriction, but any kind of structure as to how they should navigate their health. And again, it can go both ways. It can be a case of where we have so many new ideas, new breakthroughs in terms of medicine and healthcare. That can definitely happen in the next year. But also a lot of people may care about their health even less and the health of others. And this is including sexually as well, by the way. Especially we're talking about there's going to be like a resurgence of like drug use, you know, people with loose inhibitions. That could potentially lead to a massive rise in STDs. I'm not trying to sound gloomy, but you know me. I have to keep it real. You know, I have to put the good and the bad all together at the same time. But yeah, you're absolutely spot on. That is something that I've noticed as well. Going back to what I said about the Renaissance and the arts and creativity, it will also have a knock-on effect in spirituality and philosophy. So there's going to be more people taking interest in spiritual practices, in magic, in witchcraft, wanting to understand astrology more, especially with Saturn in Aquarius, and Aquarius rules astrology. People are going to be really seeking out a higher power of some sorts. Now, as I said, if you seek it in the wrong places, when you're vulnerable, it could be a dangerous, death cult. But it doesn't have to be. It can be, you know, recommitting yourself to a certain philosophy or a practice or a religion. But I also want to say as well, be mindful of how you express that if you do, especially those that are occult practitioners, because when Saturn goes into Pisces next year, I mean, we're already starting to see that on Instagram and TikTok, for example, that certain pages that discuss tarot and astrology are being restricted. That is going to kick up again a little next year. So I'm not saying everyone go offline and don't show what you're doing, but, you know, don't show everything. Be tempered with it. You know, keep certain things to yourself or to the people in your physical life, because when Saturn goes into Pisces, that will encourage some states institutions to be like, oh, you know, there's too much of this magic stuff going around. You need to put restrictions on that, you know.
Interesting. I think that's interesting for all of us, because there's two pressures in there that you're talking about, right? It's like a really expansive pressure to share this grounding in love. There's an opportunity to really amplify a message of love beyond borders, of in the face of all this darkness and everything ugly that we've seen, to use our knowledge of craft and our knowledge of this really love based, I think, natural religion or spirituality, or you can be an atheist witch, but like to really use that and connect with that to people, but then also to be really fucking careful, like also be boundaried, also protect yourself, and that's a tricky balance.
Absolutely 100%. And as you said, it is tricky, and I understand that. I'm Cancer rising, so I really am governed by the lunar cycle, as it were. But I just remembered something that I got told the other day by one of my astrology teachers, and it goes back to Russia actually. I can't remember the name of the comet, but in 2020 there was a comet that passed through the Bear constellation. Now, the Bear is the spiritual overseer of Russia, right?
Right.
But as it passed through the Bear constellation, it also passed into the constellation of Gemini between Castor and Pollux. Now, for those that know the mythology, will be aware of the story about Castor and Pollux and the battle between them. And even when you look in the Torah, the Bible, other ancient texts, humans always saw comets as an omen for something in the future, as a warning of, oh, okay, something's going to happen. So even the sky in 2020 was telling us, watch out for what's going to go on over there, because brotherly nations, sibling nations could really be at each other's throats. And look where we are now in 2022 after the North Node left Gemini.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And that's, many times this week, the bear has come up in different contexts, both, because this is kind of a bear time. At least here we are in deep winter, but there's these first signs of spring, and this is when they come out and they're hungry and they're looking after their kids, and we're all kind of shaking a little bit our fur. It's interesting about the bear. There's something there maybe about embodying the bear a little bit. What do you think when you look at the astrology for Ukraine? Like I have friends now, their families in Mariupol, they can't reach their grandmother, their aunts, their family. This is a nation at war, and it's like one of many places that has been violated by fascism gone awry, but it's a place currently under bombing and invasion. What do you see anything in their stars that can give those people strength, or those allies strength?
Yeah, definitely. And I kind of want to go back to 1856 a bit, because it is actually connected in a way. Because
oh, good. Sorry for derailing that, but I'm glad you found a way to bring it back
purposely. No, you know what? You didn't derail, because actually the tangent you went off on reminds me of things I've forgotten to speak about. So no, you didn't derail me. Yeah, so as I said, we had the artist Gottlieb, who was born in February 21st, which is now considered Western Ukraine. But also later that year, we had Ukrainian poet Ivan Franko, who was the founder of the socialist movement in Ukraine. Now, this is really important because he was a translator, he was a philosopher, he was an ethnographer, but he really did put in the roots that began the socialist movement in Ukraine, where people realized that they can have their own sovereignty and their own identity. Now, going back into the present time, believe it or not, some of it, there's been quite a lot of births that have happened, women in shelters giving birth, and believe it or not, one of those, or more than one of those children, is going to be really important for the future of Ukraine, in terms of, again, sowing seeds and laying roots and reminding people what it means to be a sovereign being. But, for the people now, there is going to be a continuous restriction in terms of how far people can go, how far they can travel. People will have to find a new place for home. However, the structures that I mentioned that are crumbling will benefit Ukraine as well, because part of the reason why Ukraine has been caught up in such a sticky mess is because of the capitalist structures that have been so deeply ingrained by here, UK, US, and Russia. And when like I said, when that financial shift happens, when the currency power shifts, this is going to really benefit Ukraine. And what we're actually going to see is that good things are coming. There's a lot of bad things now, but good things are coming, and there's going to be a shift. And that part of the world, which I know for some reason people see as primitive and third world, well, guess what? It's going to be rising up from the ashes. And whether Russia wants to be a part of that, well, that's going to be down to its leader. But in terms of Ukraine, Bulgaria, Poland, Slovakia, all of these countries, Hungary, Romania, there's going to be an uprising because of what is happening now, an uprising in terms of, okay, now we're going to lead the people. We've had to come together as brothers and sisters, even after warring, like Castor and Pollux. But because we've done that, we now actually have more of a footing to help guide other people, to help guide other communities, as an example of, you know, what the highest manifestation of Aquarius energy can do when you come together as a community and you bring all your smarts and all your ideas together to create something new. So to those that have people in Ukraine now, it's really hard, it's really tough. And again, I don't use astrology to wishy-wash and dilute the realities of what's happening. You will be able to talk to people again, that I do know. Unfortunately, it won't always be good news, but you will be able to talk to people again. Ukrainians won't be losing their identity. Their home may look very different for a while, but Ukrainians will always be Ukrainians, and they're going to come back even stronger than this. And also the position of where the country is geographically, that is very likely to change as well. And again, that's not their fault, but the map of where Ukraine will be 20 years from now, for example, is going to be very, very different. But I don't want people thinking that they've lost and that's it, there's no hope. No, there's a lot of things going on there, a lot of karmic things that are happening. And again, that's not me to dilute the realities, but there is. I mean, if you look at the president of Ukraine, for instance, his grandfather was the only sole survivor out of all of his brothers during the Holocaust. And there's something really poignant in that he is now, you know, the remaining descendant of that last aspect of that bloodline that's now fighting in Ukraine. And as we know, historically, that part of the world has had a horrific history when it's come to killing hundreds of thousands of people, including Jews. So yes, it's horrible. Yes, it's scary. Yes, it's really, really violent and dangerous, and we need to all be aware. But there's amazing things coming through. There's people being born that are going to be so important for the future of Ukraine and its history. And believe me, all is not lost. All is not lost.
It is always such a pleasure to listen to you. And I feel it right now, your grasp of patterns, you know, I mean, the way you described that, I asked you for a little new bio, and the way you described that you really anchor yourself in patterns. It's so accurate for what is so calming or so reassuring about listening to you, is it really feels like we're not just cherry picking from, you know, this aspect or that thing we've seen in the stars or whatever. It feels like you're able to hold a really big grid of knowledge, a really big weaving in a way that feels really comforting, without being bullshitty. So I appreciate you. I did want to offer, if you're comfortable, to open it up to the coven if anybody has questions.
Absolutely. I mean, I hope I can answer them, but yes, fire away.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be anything, let's say, super astrologically advanced. I mean, I think we're all coming in at different levels of learning that language and learning how it can cast light on different things. And one thing I really enjoyed from the beginning is, you made it clear it's a language, and you also made it clear that you're still surprised by it, that you can look at what is coming in planets, and you looked at your own Saturn return and thought it was going to mean one thing for you, and it ended up meaning something else. And those depths of what those influences could be can still be surprising to all of us. So we're more learning a language in the same way that you're learning French and Spanish to connect to different parts of our ancestry. You know, we're learning a language to connect with different possibilities for ourselves. So
absolutely. And astrology is one of the oldest languages that humans have. You know, humans have been studying the planets for over 5,000 years, when we could only see 5 planets in the sky at the time. So yeah, it's a language that is forever evolving. There's always new things to be understood, new texts to be translated. So yeah, absolutely 100% agree with you.
I have a question or a concept that
Hey!
hi, Monefa. I'm really curious about like where you see a difference or find a balance between observing patterns and like participating in them, or like finding the empowerment to feel like you are making part of that pattern a thing or influencing the pattern. Like, can you talk about that, like in terms of like, especially maybe witchcraft and spells, things like that?
Absolutely. And it's something that I did discuss in an article a while back, and unfortunately I can't remember what I wrote, but essentially, yeah, there are two differences. So when we're observing patterns, we're creating and perceiving simultaneously. So the way that my mind works is I will look for the details that no one notices, you know, if it's numbers, if it's letters, if it's words, if it's time periods, and my brain is continuously creating and perceiving that. But when I actually am aware that I'm in the pattern myself, that's basically me walking, not walking literally, but going in between that creation and perception process, but I am now the mediator between that process. If you think of like a Mobius strip, where on one side you have creation, on the other side perception, to be part of the pattern, you're going in the middle of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Oh, I love that concept of the Mobius strip.
Anyone else have any questions?
Hi. I think this is a little bit jumping off of what Emily just asked, but I have in my natal chart, I have Sun conjunct Jupiter in Cancer at 20 degrees. So over this last couple of years, we've had all of these, and my rising sign is Gemini. So all of these eclipses and cycles that we've had have been hitting my natal chart, like really personally, really hard. And so I'm wondering about how I should read that in light of all of this global stuff that's also happening. Like I feel some sort of cosmic responsibility somehow, or like I'm supposed to get charged up and do things, but also like it's been really hard also, like that all the transformation that those planets have been pushing in my personal life have been really challenging. So yeah. I don't know, that's maybe just a bit of a rant, but also a question in terms of what in your experience might be helpful for navigating that.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to the Gemini ascendants there. Yeah, you guys have not been having it easy the past 2 years, because it's like, I want to do all these things, but how can I do them all at the same time? But I need to do them all at the same time. And yeah, so I would definitely look to, what the North Node and South Node are doing right now, because they currently will be in your 12th and 6th house. So don't feel like the new things you're seeking out have to be very visible. They can very much be behind the scenes in that way. And also, if you feel that you have commitments or responsibilities that don't fit you anymore, you can let go of them to make space for new ones, while also understanding that what you may perceive as doing doesn't have to necessarily be get up and going. It can be thinking, it can be communicating, it can be directing. So don't feel like if you're not out there protesting in the streets, you're not doing anything. You know, yes, sometimes people are protesting, sometimes they're coordinating these protests, sometimes they're navigating these protests, sometimes, oh, you're welcome, Hope. And you know, so don't feel that, you know, if you want to spend time at home and introspect and be hidden and you're not doing anything, no, you're still doing things, you're still doing work, you're just doing it in a different way. And you know, if you think historically, like scientists and philosophers, they didn't all do things in the same way. Some of them, you know, didn't reveal their breakthroughs until it was official. Some of them were very, very public with the process. So be gentle with yourself, and whatever ideas are coming through, allow them to flow, because the society we live in kind of make us feel sometimes like every idea we have, we must execute it, and it's like, actually no. Sometimes that certain ideas are brainstormed to the other ideas that we actually need to execute. So if you feel sometimes overwhelmed with a lot of thoughts that are coming in, just remember, you don't have to act on all of them. They can be leading you to other things that you do want to act on.
That's a huge relief to hear. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I felt relieved hearing that. I'm not in the same situation. I'm Scorpio rising. I was on a call the other day with a bunch of witches, and we were like, wait, is everyone on here Scorpio rising? It was a whole circle. It's so strange. I looked at my daughter's chart the other day. She's not Scorpio rising, but she's like, Jupiter is in Scorpio, Venus is in Scorpio, her moon's in Scorpio, her
oh wow,
her midhaven's in Scorpio. I was like, I don't know what that means, but I think it means I'm in for it.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because I'm thinking that my Pluto is in Scorpio, I'm a Cancer rising, so that explains as well why our ideas and our train of thoughts have been very synchronous with each other. But now I know that as well. For anyone that is out there also Scorpio ascendant, the South Node in your first house means that you may become preoccupied with this idea that you have to have the perfect self-image in order to be seen and recognized by others, but you'll be letting go of that. But if you don't let go of that, word of warning, that could really, I want to say F you up, but it could F you up. Because the South Node, if you think about the mythology behind the North and the South Node is the tail of the dragon. So it doesn't have a head. And when you don't have a head, you just kind of have to allow things to flow and just trust that wherever you land is where you need to land. And in the South Node, we try and you can get really obsessed wherever the South Node is of like, I must perfect this area, because you actually know what to do. But your ego is like, but do you though? And then you get obsessed with being like, okay, I need to perfect this. So yeah, for anyone who's a Scorpio ascendant, try your best to let go of the idea that you have to continuously be perfecting who you are. You already are perfect. And now is really the time to shed any ideas of what it means to be powerful. If you think that, and I've said this to clients actually, if you're sitting there and you're worried that being powerful is going to hurt others, I guarantee you're not going to be hurting people, because historically, you don't have dictators going, oh, well, hold on a minute, generals, maybe what I'm doing might actually harm these people. They don't do that. So if you find yourself questioning yourself, like, I'm really scared that I might harm people with my power, I guarantee you the fact you're questioning it already means that you have safeguards in place. So go do what you're doing, because we need water energy is needed right now. The conjunction in Pisces, Cancer's always been influenced by the moon, and now with the Scorpio energy, the South Node, water. It's time for the water signs to really step into their gifts, because water signs, we're the only ones that can navigate what it is to have no boundaries and not be completely lost. We always know how to come back to the shore, where other signs may struggle with that. But with water, it's like, no, we know the depths are limitless, but we also know that it's okay to reach to the surface as well and go to the shore again.
Yeah. As a Cancer sun, Scorpio rising, everything you just said, I was like, let me come with me to the depths. Come on, everybody.
I mean, the funny side of it is as well, is I always say that, don't mess with anyone, but especially if somebody's got a lot of water in their chart, you really don't want to mess with them. Like my mum, she's a Cancer rising like me, and she's like got a Pisces stellium, and I always say to people, water signs can be petty as hell. When you think that we won't go like Michelle Obama's like, when you go low, go high. I know Michelle Obama isn't a water sign, because water signs don't do that. Water signs are like, okay, you want to go low? Come, we will go all the way down to the core, down to the Earth's core. I will take you with me. Come.
Yeah. There's so much in that. I also love your piece about if you're afraid you might hurt somebody, then you have the checks in place. So go big with your love, go deep with your love, go deep with your power. And
because even when you look at like really dangerous cult leaders, and I want to specify the reason I'm saying dangerous cult leaders is because not all cults are toxic. I mean, you look at Comic-Con, that's a really good example. Comic-Con is a really great cult where you turn up and you dress and you do your thing and then you go back home and do what you want. But dangerous cults, they want to tell you that no, you must live, breathe, eat, think, everything they do. And if you don't, you're nothing and you'll be cast out. Even cult leaders, they don't have that introspection. At one point they would have, but in order to receive the kind of capitalist power that they're hungry for, they have to shut that switch off inside them where they do question things. Because the question things means that you're going to stop doing what you're doing in terms of harming others. If you want to harm others, you're not going to question it. You're just going to be like, well, hey, I want this thing, I'm going to get it, and I don't really care who I hurt.
I have a question or maybe a comment. So I noticed you said something at the closer to the beginning about like structures that we have now, 10 years from now, being very different from what we've got. And I thought that was interesting, in part because of what we know about like where we will be climate change wise. And they're projecting like 10 years out is basically when our carbon budget runs out. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that particular topic.
I mean, yeah, there's so much to begin with that. I mean, okay, so Taurus is very much connected to the earth, the weather, and our environment. And we have the North Node there right now at the moment. And whenever the nodes are in a certain sign, by the way, for those that aren't aware, it means that the eclipses will be in that sign. So the next eclipse cycle will be in Taurus and Scorpio. So it really comes down to, as Risa and I was saying in the beginning, seeking new countries for resources and going about it in different ways. Because the issue isn't that we use things or we consume things. The issue is how much we're consuming at such a short period of time, right? And I think everything that's going on will have to make all of us restructure. Okay, well, how can we reduce the consumption of this? We still need it, but how can we reduce it? And it does have an effect on our climate. It does have an effect on the environment. And do I think the world, I think it will be a case where it will be devastating to the point where there's no life? No. Does it mean that we have to really rethink how we live? 100% yes. And this is why there's going to be a real emphasis on community when Pluto goes into Aquarius, because if we don't have that connection of community, then we really will be screwed in 10 years' time. Because when certain shifts are going to be happening environmentally and financially, it's really going to be the community that saves us. It's going to be people going, come, we have resources here, come to us, we can help you, and we can share this with you, or hey, do you need this? We can give this to you. However, we also need to be aware that, some of the activism groups, they're doing great things, but again, when you're coming from a place of ego, that can be corrupted very, very easily. So we also need to be mindful that when these activist groups are doing, their protests about, reducing how much oil we're using and things like that, that we have to be mindful that it's not going to be corrupted in a way where we actually lose sight of why people were doing that, and we're just doing it for the sake of creating chaos and terror in the supposed name of ecology. When I say things will look very different from that now, from then, everything, how we consume, how we share, where we live, how we live, what we use, how we spend, what we eat, it's all going to change. But the fundamental thing that's going to make all of that work and make sure that we don't become extinct is the need for community. And right now, this current structure, this current empire that is humbling, very much emphasized on screw community, only think about yourself. Self. And yes, it's important to have a sense of self, but as we see in astrology, once you get into Gemini and Cancer, it's about going outside of yourself and recognizing others, family, connection, home. So for those that want to still focus on the self and hoard things and not really share, they're going to see how quickly that's not going to benefit them, even if they do have, billions and quadrillions and trillions. Believe it or not, that will actually be worthless if you have no community, because it will get to a point where you won't be able to buy people. I mean, you won't be able to buy a community, you won't be able to buy them, because people realize, especially with all this Pisces energy, that actually, if I don't have my humanity, if I lose my soul, then having billions means jack shit. It doesn't mean anything at all. And we're seeing that shift already where people are like, yeah, get your bags, get your money, enjoy your life, be rich. But once you get to a certain level where you're hoarding it, no one wants to be around somebody that wants to hoard resources. Some do now, obviously, but as we go further on, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, it's going to become really, it's going to be like a really ugly taste in the mouth. You're just like, but like, you have all these resources and you want to hoard them and you're not even, no, go away. I know for some people listening, they can be like, what do you mean? Like, really? Would it be possible that billionaires and trillionaires will get shunned? Yeah, believe me, it would be very possible for people who hoard wealth to literally be shunned, and people be like, hey, we managed without you handing out your billions to all of us. I think we can manage now. Thank you very much. And there's an episode of Twilight Zone where this is very poignant, but I can't remember the name of that episode. Sorry.
So everyone's assignment is to go rewatch all of the Twilight Zone. Lots of good lessons there. Thanks for the optimism and the realism. Thanks for the sense that time goes on. Thanks for the perspective of deep time. I think that's something that a really good astrologer can provide, that we can get so tight in our circles, our media circles, our day-to-day. And it's good, we feel personally connected to those babies being born in bomb shelters in Ukraine because we saw them, we feel personally connected in these moments, and our attention gets drawn so quickly from news cycle to news cycle that it's helpful to pull out into a broader perspective of this change that is coming, of turning against this hoarding sense, turning against this violent individualism, and rerouting in what we know.
Absolutely. And yeah, I agree with you. And you're very welcome. And thank you for having me on this platform and just creating an amazing space for, new voices and new pioneers and philosophers and magicians and writers, new people that the future is going to need coming through. Thank you so much. And I don't know, maybe it's the doing me, but I'm always optimistic about, even in the darkest times when, the future of humanity is uncertain, there's always a miracle of sorts where some people will survive and they will push through and they will persevere. And I yeah, I don't think it's over for us just yet. I really don't. That's not to say hard times and tough times aren't ahead, but I always say, we didn't get this far to only get this far. Oh, I have one more thing to say, actually, going back to the bear and the symbolism of the bear, because obviously bears are very scary for a lot of people and have that capacity for violence. However, they always say, if you stand up against the bear and you roar as loudly and as tall as the bear actually retreats and runs away. So I think that's really something for all of us to think about.
Oh my gosh, you remind me of a story. My cousin raised her first baby in the Yukon, and they were out on a hike in the Yukon with her little 1-year-old in her backpack, and turned a corner and there was a baby bear, and then right behind them was a mama grizzly. Ooh. Which is kind of worst case scenario for an animal needing to protect their young. And my cousin says she froze for a minute, and then her instinct was she threw her arms up in the air and went, I'm a mama, I'm a mama, I'm a mama. Which I love to picture because she's such a funny person, but it's also just the greatest answer. And the bear and the baby were like, yeah, okay, and they turned around and walked away.
It was like, okay, maybe not these guys, maybe someone else.
Yeah, which on one level is maybe recognizing mother to mother, okay, we'll just give each other space here. And on another level was just you're making some weird noises, lady. We're just gonna go this way.
That's a brilliant story. Thank you for sharing that.
My cousin Karen is a member of the coven, so I look forward to her hearing this and responding.
Oh yeah, please let me know what she thinks.
Are you still taking coaching clients? Are you still doing astrology consultations with people? Are there ways that people can connect with you directly?
Yeah, so I just have one website that basically amalgamates everything I do, monefawalker.co.uk. there's one, yeah, there's actually a wait list starting to grow for coaching, which I'm really pleasantly surprised about and scared because that's a lot of responsibility. But I'm still very much open for astrology readings, either over Zoom or recorded, whatever people's preference or comfort levels are. But yes, I'm still very much open for all of that.
And you have a Patreon these days. Can you tell us about what people can find if they become supporters there?
Yeah, sure. So, as I said, I've been using the social media space differently. So when I tend to go into really deep astrological analysis about certain things, I do that on Patreon now because I can just kind of write without feeling restricted. I also tend to share more things connected to magic there, whether it's rituals or certain methods that have worked for me or clients. I'll share them with people on there, and also my music as well. Any exclusives before they get released out into the world, I share on my Patreon as well, so patrons can get first access.
Delightful. What a wonderful space to be closer with people who are truly excited about and supportive of what you do. I know for us, our Patreon has truly become our home and just an opportunity to be so inspired by the people in our community and uplifted by them. So yeah, go be a part of that community around Monefa's incredibly insightful work. Take a breath. Carry a little bit of hope with you in this, a little bit of my drippy family, and a little bit of the roaring bear, and a little bit of yelling back to the bear, I'm a mama, I'm a mama, I'm a mama, because you are, whatever your gender identity, whatever your place in those relationships of family, you are someone who brings new life into the world. You're ripe with fertility and change, and you are core to communities around you, and you are a seed and a wind and a rainstorm, and we're glad to know you and glad to be connected to you in this great weaving. So have hope, and we'll see you soon, and bless if I can be.
You must be a witch.
The Missing Witches podcast is brought to you by the Missing Witches Coven. Join us right now on patreon.com/missingwitches. Blessed fucking be.